If you've ever heard of compression floss, in this video I'm going to show you how to use it. We're going to talk about our knee, ankle, and elbow. So this is the compression floss. All it is basically a giant rubber band. The important things that we know is that it's going to wrap always towards our heart and how much stretch to put on it. So we need to know that this is 0% stretch, this is 100% stretch, and what we're typically looking to use is about 50% stretch, but you'll also know by the feedback that you're getting from your body. If things instantly go numb or it feels wrong or painful for you, then you've wrapped too tight. If you feel like you're not getting any benefit out of it and it's not really causing compression on the area, then we also know that it's too loose. So what you'll see, what we ideally want to see is when we take it off, that the coloring of our skin changes a little bit from kind of that whiter or like yellowed color to a bit of a reddish pink flushed color. And that is how we'll know that it's an appropriate level. We'll have it on for about 1 to 2 minutes. It won't get too uncomfortable for us, and we'll see that light flushing when we do it. So we have some options on what exactly we do with the compression floss. If we're looking at the knee, sometimes you'll see it wrapped all the way right over the knee. That's acceptable. Or we can go below the knee and then a second piece above the knee. That also works for the knee. When we're talking about the ankle, what we want to do is get it wrapped around kind of the midfoot here. Get it so that it's not going to slide out from under you, and then you're going to wrap all the way up however far you need to go. Typically with the ankle, because it's a smaller joint, we're able to get more wraps on it, but you're going to cover off that whole ankle area. Usually your heel is going to stick out a little bit. When we're looking at the elbow, depending on what's going on with our elbow, we can either wrap right over the elbow, or if it's more of a forearm based issue, then we can just wrap the forearm kind of up to the elbow. So we have choices. We can play around with it a little bit and find what works best for us. So that's using the compression floss for joints specifically, but we can also use it in other areas like say our hamstring to help with the lengthening of that tissue, because sometimes you'll find, especially through the hamstrings, is that like only one area feels really tight and restricted. So what we can do is we can target that area. So if we find this part of your hamstring or way up here is bothering us more than the rest of the hamstring, then we can wrap it around that area to target it specifically. So one of the important things with the compression floss to understand is what exactly is it doing. So it's doing kind of two main things for us. It's going to be restricting the blood flow, which might sound bad when you first hear it, but when you understand the principle behind it, it starts to make a lot more sense. So we're going to restrict the blood flow, and then when we do give it that blood flow back, it's kind of like it gets a rush of it through, and we almost get more to that area. This is where it gets really valuable, is around joints that tend to not get as much blood flow. So our muscle bellies are going to get more blood to them than where it turns into connective tissue and we have tendons and ligaments all attaching. Because there's less blood flow, it takes longer to heal because there's less flow, so we can't bring the good stuff in as easily and get rid of the bad stuff as easily. So that's one of the things that we're working on, is that compression that's going to cut off blood flow and then give it back to us. And then the other thing that we're looking to do is basically create tension on those layers of tissue. So we have a whole bunch of layers of tissue kind of stacked up on top of each other. And sometimes what happens is those layers of tissue get matted down and stuck together, and then we don't get as much of a good gliding surface. So what we want to do is kind of put pressure on those and then force movement while there's pressure on them, and that kind of breaks everything free to move again. So a really good example of that, as you can see as I'm sitting here, basically sitting how most people would typically sit, is the very top part of my hamstring is sitting on the chair, and it's getting mashed together all day long when you're sitting on that chair. So those layers of tissue are really stuck together. You can come in, you can put compression on that, and then if you get up and you stretch your hamstring and take it from a short position to a long position, you're going to free those layers up to start sliding again. And same thing with our other joints, or if there's scar tissue build up there. So I use compression floss a lot after people go through knee surgeries, and there's there's scar tissue built up, or same thing around the ankle. We get ankle surgeries or injuries with lots of scar tissue. It can start to help to mobilize and break up those tissues a little bit. So I'm just gonna give you guys a quick demo on the knee of what it looks like and kind of talk you through it. So one of the most important things is to get the starting right. It'll make the rest of it so much easier. So like I said earlier, you typically want to be wrapping towards your heart. It just helps with the movement of lymphatic fluids, pushing it up towards where it wants to go instead of down away from it. So the first piece, you're really not that focused on getting a whole bunch of tension into it. You can put some, but all you really care about is getting that overlap on it so that now it sticks and it's not gonna slide off versus, you know, if you just get started right away, it's just gonna chase itself, right? It's gonna keep coming off. So that first one, all you really want is to get rubber on rubber there. And then from here, you can go to about that 50% stretch. So like I said, this would be 0. This would be out at 100. So we want a fair amount of tension on there. And I'm gonna go just below the knee with this one. And then afterwards, I will show you what it looks like to go over the knee. So that's wrapped. It's comfortable for me. I can feel that there's tension there, but it's not like my foot immediately went numb or that I feel uncomfortable with this. There's tension, but it's still comfortable for me. As you'll see, I'll be able to keep this on for a minute or two. Next piece is typically I take 2 fingers, put it in before my last wrap, and that just allows me to pull it out. All you're gonna do is tuck it under nice and easily so that you have a little tail that makes it easier to take off when you're ready. So that would be my bottom. Next we'll do top. So here you can see I'm just leaving basically the kneecap or your patella, leaving it out and going above and below it. Like I said, you can go over it, just depends on your situation a little bit, exactly how you're gonna do that. And you can see here too, now I'm adding a little bit more tension as I get into my thigh because it's just more muscle there. It can handle a little bit more on there. And then once you have it all wrapped up, whatever joint you're working on, what you want to do is take it through as full a range of motion as possible, because that's part of what is helping make that change, is that we're getting those gliding surfaces that are now compressed and getting them to move the muscles to lengthen and shorten. So what I would do with a knee is do, say, like squats or lunges, but as long as I'm taking it to as bent as I can, to as straight out as I can. If maybe you've had recent injury or surgery and you can't load that tissue yet, you still want to try and go through whatever range of motion you're capable of. Maybe after surgery that's just like this, or maybe you can get all the way to here but unloaded, and then maybe down the line you're able to actually get up, squat, and go through a loaded range of motion with it. When you're ready to take it off, really easy, you're just gonna reach, grab that little tail that you made, pull it out, and then just take it off, and you'll see the color of that leg change a little bit, and that gives you good feedback that it's an appropriate amount. So you can see it's a little flushed through here now, whereas before, just when I first took it off, it was kind of like whiter, and then it went flush red. So you guys will see that on this one hopefully as well here. Is that, yeah, you can see it when it first comes off, how it's lighter, and then it starts to get a little redder. Tough to see with the camera, but when you are wrapping it yourself, you'll notice that change in color. So that's basically how you want to do that with the knee if you're going below and above. Now I'll show you if I'm just gonna cover the whole joint or if I only had one roll. Okay, so let's say we only have one band or we just wanna go over the joint. If we just have one band, we're gonna cover a little bit less area. If we have two and we still wanna go over the knee, we're just gonna get a bit more coverage. So if you just had one, you would start a little bit higher up. You're still getting that first one just catching itself there. And then from there, you're gonna wrap over the knee itself. And you want about 50% overlap as you're going through this, because then when you bend the joint, it's gonna continue to be covered. So that's what it looks like if you're doing just over the joint or you had one band. Alternatively, if you have one band, you could do the lower portion, take it off, do the upper portion, and do them separately. But this is another option that you have available to you when we're looking at compression floss on the knee. Now the same ideas can be applied that I showed you on the knee to your other joints. So same thing with the ankle. And same thing with the elbow either right over the elbow or more focused on that forearm piece. And where I find that this is most effective is somebody who has been through kind of a surgery or an injury and has a lot of scar tissue or tissue kind of built up and layered up, and there's restricted range of motion through that joint, or when there's that kind of like achy, always sore, heavy kind of joint, and especially with activity it gets worse and it feels like you just can't clear what's happening in that joint. So that, like, say you go for a hike and afterwards it's really achy and sore, this is going to help clear that up. So really it's helpful for just about any types of pain that we deal with, but I find those are the best places where we get the best results with it, and it can really be used primarily on the joints that don't get as good a blood flow, but you can use it, like I said, on muscle bellies like the hamstring, but best use cases is definitely for the joints. So obviously you can see that there's a ton of value in using this compression floss. I've recommended it to a lot of people for different types of pain because it is so useful and one of the best tools that I like to have with me in my arsenal if I go traveling, if I'm on the road, or if I'm trying to help somebody, because it's so multi-dimensional and so useful with pain.